UFC Mexico Moreno versus Erceg takes place this weekend, and I'm going to be breaking it all down today. All 13 fights in the card, giving my prediction, saying how I think they're going to go. Let's get into this. First up on the card, Austin Hubbard versus MarQuel Mederos. Just sort of a veteran versus prospect fight. Austin Hubbard's had 2 stints in the UFC. The second one, he got back in through The Ultimate Fighter, where he lost to Kurt Oliveira in the finale. MarQuel Mederos, Contender Series, came in, he's fought one guy already, Landon Quinones, I believe. I think Austin Hubbard's not amazing. Like, he's not terrible. He's 4-6 in the UFC. But he's lost to Alexander Hernandez, Kurt Oliveira, Vinc Pichel, Joe Selecki, Mark Madsen, Davey Ramos. Like, those aren't all, like, bottom of the barrel guys, but they're not, you don't want to be losing to that many sort of guys in the UFC, I think, if you're going to be something. MarQuel Mederos, the only fight he's lost was in his 3rd professional bout, where he lost by split decision a couple years ago. Since then, he's stringed together quite a few in a row, obviously, mostly on the regional scene, but he's got 2 sort of under the UFC umbrella, 1 Contender Series, 1 in the UFC. As said, attributes pretty much both the same, except MarQuel Mederos has that's 1.5 inches less reach. He is going to be about 5 years younger, though. MarQuel Mederos knocks people out. Austin Hubbard, never been knocked out. I think MarQuel probably is going to outstrike Austin Hubbard to a decision. Might be a bit of a scrap. Austin Hubbard, probably stay in there. But yeah, I'm going to go with MarQuel Mederos by decision. Jamall Emmers versus Gabriel Miranda. This one could be interesting, but I don't think it will be. I think Jamall Emmers is deceivingly good. He's a little better than his UFC record indicates. He's 3-4 in the UFC, but if you look at his losses, they're to Nate Landwehr, Jack Jenkins, Pat Sabatini, and Giga Chikadze, all very good guys. Well, not very good, but all, decent quality guys. Jack Jenkins, it was a split decision. A lot of people thought he won. The Giga Chikadze fight was a split decision. The Nate Landwehr fight, he rocked Nate Landwehr at the start of there. The Pat Sabatini one, that's kind of where I think things get interesting, because he did get submitted by Pat Sabatini, and Gabriel Miranda, he's a submission artist. He gets most of his wins by submission, 16 out of his 17 fights, in fact. That being said, though, he himself has 7 losses. In the UFC, he only has 2, though. He's 1-2 in the UFC. He lost to Benoit Saint-Denis and Morgan Charrier, two French guys. Yeah, and both of those guys are decent. Maybe the stock of Morgan Charrier has gone down a little bit after UFC London, and Benoit's stock's certainly gone down since he was on that big run, but nevertheless, you can lose to worse guys. He beat Shane Young in a minute, choked him out. Shane Young, though, I'm sorry, but probably not UFC quality. I think Jamall Emmers probably can keep this fight standing. I think the Pat Sabatini fight is probably a bit of an outlier there. I don't think Gabriel Miranda is good enough to be able to get Jamall Emmers down, and I think Jamall will likely win. Probably, yeah, I think he'll coast to a decision, I would say. Jamall Emmers by decision. Rafa Garcia versus Vinc Pichel. This one could be interesting. I think Rafa Garcia, if you look at his career in the UFC, he's 4-4. And you look at the guys who he's losing to, it's kind of the same as I was speaking about before. He's lost to Grant Dawson, Drakkar Klose, Nasrat Haqparast, and Chris Gruteschmacher. The only guy that's really not great is the Gruteschmacher loss. But Dawson, Klose, and Haqparast are all they're decent sort of top 25 lightweights. Dawson probably, I think he's ranked top 15. But the wins he's getting aren't great. He's beating Natan Levy, who's not UFC quality. Jesse Ronson, definitely not UFC quality. Mahashate, who knows? And then a washed-up Clay Guida. So originally I was going to pick Vinc Pichel, the very inactive 42-year-old man. But then, I sort of saw that age, and I was like, I can't trust a 42-year-old lightweight. I think you're starting to see it with his performances. He's lost his last 2. And I think youth is definitely on Rafa Garcia's side. He's 30 years old. He's almost 12 years younger. He's the heavy favourite here. I'm going to go with Rafa Garcia in this fight. I think possibly even What by? A lot of decisions. I know I'm picking a lot of decisions. It's just how I say it. I think Rafa Garcia probably wins this one by decision. Julia Polastri takes on Lupita Godinez in this fight on the card. Attribute-wise, they're both fairly similar, except for the fact that Julia has 2 inches of reach. Looking at their records, neither one of them is particularly pretty, but I want to highlight Lupita Godinez, specifically her UFC record. It's 7-5, but we'll just talk about the ones more as of recent. Mackenzie Dern loss, Verna Jandaroba loss. She's coming on a 2-fight losing streak, which I think, might sway some people, but I think she's decent for sort of a top 10, not top 10, top 15, maybe to her ceiling's probably being top 8, somewhere around there. For a woman's, what division is this? Strawweight. Women's strawweight, yeah, of course it's strawweight. I think she's alright, she's got some good striking. No wins by KO TKO, which is weird. That surprised me when I saw that, but then, I don't know, she doesn't have much power. I think she's going to be able to come in here and pretty solidly outstrike Julia Polastri, who I don't think's been very impressive so far. Yeah, Lupi, incredibly active, and if you look at her recent losses, she lost to Angela Hill. That's not great, but sometimes these up-and-comers lose to Angela Hill. And in these last 2 fights, she's fought Verna Jandaroba, who arguably should have gotten the title shot over Tatiana Suarez, argue with a wall. Maybe I'll go into that at some other point. And she lost to Mackenzie Dern in a fight that I remember thinking she pretty clearly won. But the UFC love giving Mackenzie Dern, they love giving her favourable matchups up the division. It's a whole nother thing on Mackenzie Dern. Anyway, I think Lupita Godinez is going to outstrike Julia Polastri to a decision because she has no finishing power. Melquizael Costa versus Christian Rodriguez. This one's interesting. I'm very invested in Christian Rodriguez, so I'm excited that he's fighting again so soon after beating Austin Bashi. Because that was, when was that? That was in January, yeah. So less than 2 months late. No, not less. A little over 2 months, sorry. Later. He's coming back already. Melquizael Costa, he's alright. He's 3-2 in the UFC. I know I like highlighting the losses, but I think it really, it gives more context to a fighter than just like who they won. But he's lost to Moises and Garcia. Some guys lose to Moises, man. I know it's not great, and if you're going to be something, you should get past Moises, but I don't think it's the end of the world. You're not losing to a bottom-of-the-barrel guy. And he got knocked out by Steve Garcia, who's on, a good run right now. Beaten Austin Lingo, who cares? Shalian Nurembeke, it's okay. And Andre Philly, which was surprising. Andre's a bit over the hill, but he guillotined him in a round, which is nice. C-Rod, though, what's really interesting about Christian Rodriguez, he loves taking undefeated records. Loves it. He beat Raul Rosas Jr., took his O. We'll talk about him later. Cameron Saaimon took his O. Isaac the Bulgarian, arguably, shouldn't have gone C-Rod's way. He still won, though. Took his O. In his last fight, as mentioned, took the O of Austin Bashi. It's just these wrestlers, man. Christian Rodriguez has great takedown defense, and they put these sort of more grappling heavy prospects against him, and he just fraud checks them. With Raul Rosas Jr., I guess they thought Christian Rodriguez wasn't as good as he thought, and they did maybe rush Raul, but we'll talk about that later. But then, inexplicably, obviously Christian lost to Jonathan Pierce in his UFC debut. Jonathan was on a run, or an unranked run. He lost to Julian Erosa, though. He got guillotined by him in a round, which is terrible. Julian Erosa is the furthest thing from a UFC prospect. He's a veteran. He was 29-11 going to that fight with C-Rod on his 3rd UFC stint. I like Julian Erosa a lot, though, so I was kind of hyped on that when it happened. But it doesn't look great for Christian Rodriguez. Melquizael Costa, another guy with an ugly record. I don't think it's going to be enough, though. I think Christian Rodriguez, I'm pretty excited, actually, to see how he does, sort of, in maybe the 15 to 20 zone. I think if he wins this fight, you give him someone just outside the rankings. Melquizael Costa, though, I just don't think he has enough to be able to beat Christian Rodriguez here. Christian showed himself against a lot of very good guys who are sort of on the come up. He showed his skill set very well. He's a very gritty guy. He's able to, go through the fire a bit in order to take the later rounds. And I think he's going to do just that against Melquizael Costa. I'm going to go by Christian Rodriguez by unanimous decision. Abita Gautier versus Jose Medina. This will probably be a quicker one. Abita's very young. Jose's he's getting up there. He's 33 now. If you look at Abita's his record, what he's doing to people, he's knocking people out. He's knocking a lot of people out. The only 2 fights he's had that have gone to decision was his debut, which he won, and his second fight, which he lost by split decision. I think Jose's never been knocked out before, but he's on a bit of a slide. He lost on the Contender Series and then got a UFC contract. Maybe there's some context I'm missing there. I know Dana has done that a couple times, but I don't know if we should be rewarding that sort of behaviour. And then he came in and lost to Zach Reese. Not a bad loss, but, I think Zach's 2-2 now. He's kind of an idiot. No fight IQ. I think Abita's probably going to test the chin of Jose Medina. And after this one, I think Jose is likely going to get cut from the UFC. Very young guy, 22 years old. That's very young, coming from Cameroon. 6'4", 81-inch reach. You just look at Jose Medina. He's 4 inches shorter. What's that? I need to do math. 6.5. That's 6.5 inches less he has in reach. Gautier is going to knock him out. I'm going to go Gautier, feel it out in the first round. Actually, am I? Wait. Yeah, I think he's going to feel out Jose in the first round, soften his chin a little bit, and then knock him out in the second round. Edgar Chairez versus CJ Vergara. 2 guys with, not so pretty records. We'll put it that way to be nice. Edgar Chairez 11-6, and CJ Vergara 12-6-1. It kind of makes you wonder why these guys are in the UFC, but that's fine. Edgar Chairez, he's 1-2-1 no contest. You look at the guys he's lost to. Joshua Van, not a bad loss. Tatsuro Taira, definitely not a bad loss. He had that weird fight with Daniel Lacerda, which was a no contest, but then came back and beat him. Whereas for CJ Vergara, he's had a few more fights in the UFC. He's lost 4 times. Ode Osborne's a bad loss. He also lost to Taira. And then, since he's on a 2-fight losing streak, losing to Asel Mabayev and Ramzan Temirov, neither of those 2 last ones bad losses. He also has a win over Daniel Lacerda as well. And then a split and a unanimous decision over 2 other guys. I think it's probably just going to be Edgar Chairez here. He has the height, he has the reach, he has the youth, he has the finishing potential over CJ Vergara. Yeah, I think the odds reflect that. I don't think it's going to be a wash, but, I just think he's probably the better fighter. There's not much more to say about it than that. What I meant when I said finishing potential is, you look at the ways they're winning. Out of CJ Vergara's 12 wins, 7 come by KO, TKO, and 5 come by decision, whereas for Edgar Chairez, out of his 11 wins, 4 come by KO, TKO, and 7 come by submission. I think he can mix it up better. Especially because CJ Vergara. CJ Vergara has been submitted twice. That's by Tatsuro Taira. I don't think Chairez is as good as Tatsuro, but that definitely shows a weakness there. And as said, Chairez does have those 7 wins by submission. That's in his wheelhouse. I'm going to pick Edgar Chairez by 3rd round submission. Ronaldo Rodriguez versus Kelvin Borjas. Looking at this matchup here, Ronaldo Rodriguez, very pretty record, 17-2. That's a very nice record. 25 years old, 2 years younger than Kelvin Borjas. A little bit taller, 3 inches less in reach though. Look at Kelvin Borjas. Really came into the UFC. He was 9-1. Since then, he's kind of, I don't want to say he's been exposed, but he's lost 2 in a row. Probably fighting for his job here. Came in off the Contender Series, won a unanimous decision because the UFC, if you win on the Contender Series now, you get a contract for some reason. But he lost to Van, a guy we mentioned before. That's not a bad loss. And Alejandro Costa, which, not the worst, but really you want to get past a guy like that. Ronaldo Rodriguez is decent, though. His 2 wins in the UFC against Denis Bondar. Not a great. I think he came into the UFC as a pretty good prospect. We've kind of since seen. I think he even might be cut now. Don't quote me on that though. Denis Bondar though, not as great of a fighter as we maybe thought when he entered. And Ode Osborne, I remember that people thinking that fight, probably should have gone to Ode a bit close, but neither here nor there. So he hasn't really beaten great guys in the UFC. But I don't think that Kelvin Borjas is a great guy in the UFC either. He's 0-2. He's a bit of a knockout merchant, knocking out a lot of people on the regional scene. But as soon as he gets into the UFC, he's just losing. Ronaldo Rodriguez, one of his losses came on the Contender Series to Jerome Rivera, which that's one of the more poorly aged losses, I would say. It's not a great guy to lose to, but then he went on a 5-fight win streak after that. What more can you really ask of the guy? And he's got a finish in the UFC as well, that's good. I think he's just going to win this fight. He's just going to outdo Kevin Borjas and win a unanimous decision. David Martinez versus Saaimon Oliveira. It's just more Contender Series guys. Just the roster's getting flooded with them. Saaimon Oliveira, a bit of a knockout artist at bantamweight, only lost one fight by split decision at Combate Global. That was almost 4 years ago now, though. Yeah, he's finishing pretty much everyone, except obviously the guy that beat him by decision, and 2 fights after that he took a guy to decision. He knocks some more guys out, 4 of them in a row, then gets to the Contender Series, fights a 5-0 guy, and it's not really much of a step up in competition, but he couldn't finish the guy, which isn't, it's not super encouraging. Same thing, why you're just giving guys contracts for anything. Speaking of, Saaimon Oliveira got a contract for winning a split decision. And then came in, he's lost since, dropped a decision to Tony Gravely, not great, and got TKO'd in the second by Daniel Marcos. That's fine. Daniel Marcos, a bit overhyped, or maybe not now. I think people are kind of adequately rating him, but undefeated guy. I think he's 16-0 now. So yeah, it's fine. I think David Martinez is going to come in. He's going to have more momentum. He's going to be the better fighter. He's going to be able to mix it up more. He's got youth on his side. He's got the height. He's got reach. For some reason, Saaimon Oliveira, his reach is listed at 66.9 inches of reach. I've never seen that before. Them go by, 0.1 decimals. But he's almost 34. It's bantamweight. He's got a decent record, but it looks like he spent a bit too much time in the regional scene. Whereas David Martinez, he's 26. He's only going to get better in the UFC. I don't think David's going to get a decision. I think, again, sort of just that same level of competition as the Contender Series I'd put Saaimon at. I think he'll probably win this fight by unanimous decision. Raul Rosas Jr. versus Vince Morales. I've got a lot to say on this one. We'll see, though. Vince Morales, he's better than his record indicates. He's 16-9, and he's 3-7 in the UFC. He's a decent guy. You see, he goes outside of the UFC after getting cut from the UFC the first time, and it's in a 5-fight win streak against a bunch of, alright, a 13-10 guy, 11-5, 34-11, that's alright. 11-4, not great recorded guys, but then he beats Hunter Azure, who was in the UFC at one point, finishes him with a Peruvian necktie. Nice. Sort of diversifying the game. Hunter Azure was 11-3 there. Not great, not terrible. Comes back into the UFC and unfortunately loses to Taylor Lapulus by decision. That's what Taylor does to people. And Elijah Smith, most recently. He's actually... It's a pretty quick turnaround for Vince Morales. About a month and a half since he lost to Elijah Smith. Smith's a prospect. Really, for Vince at this point, if he loses to Raul Rosas Jr., he's probably going to get cut, and I don't think he'll get back into the UFC again. For Raul Rosas Jr., I've got things to say about this man. He's 4-1 in the UFC, only loss, as said before, to Christian Rodriguez. His wins are against Jay Perrin, not a great win. Terrence Mitchell, not a great win. Ricky Tercios, he's alright, but he almost got choked out by Ricky Tercios, if I remember correctly, in that first round. Not great. Airi Quilling won by decision. That was good. It was fine. That was on the sphere card. He's fighting Vince Morales now. I think Vince might be his toughest test so far, but that being said, I think Vince is getting up there in age. Vince has lost twice by submission, so it's not like he's never been submitted before. That being said, he's lost 6 by decision as well. And, Raul Rosas showed in his last fight, he can go to decision after the C-Rod fight, where he kind of gassed out there in C-Rod. Didn't fraud check him, because, obviously he's won 3 in a row since then, but it's like... the UFC definitely thought that Rodriguez wasn't as good as he is. That being said, this is kind of a side tangent. I'm going to pick Raul Rosas Jr. But, about Raul, I think he should probably be getting a bit of a better step up in competition, especially if he wins this one. I know people say he's young, he's this, he's that. He's not 18 anymore. He's 20. He's almost 21, which I know is still incredibly young. But why do we have guys in the UFC if we don't think they're ready for, like, that certain level. That doesn't make any sense. You know, you're giving special treatment to a guy just because of his age. That doesn't make sense. I think he should be fighting sort of a better guy after this, maybe at the bare minimum, a guy in that top 25, preferably top 20, so he can, you know, if he wins this one, then wins another, we can start seeing him in the rankings. I don't care that he's young. That's the fun bit about having these younger guys in the UFC. Is, you know, you have, I'm not comparing him to John Jones, but you have John who wins the title at 23 because he's so young. You know, and I think even if you do give Raul a couple, I don't want to say cans, but lesser guys in the meantime, he still probably could make it to a belt technically if he is of that level by the time he's 23. But, you know, I'm getting a bit impatient with this Raul Rosas Jr. guy. It's going to be a 6th fight in the UFC. Let's start to see something. But who knows? He did lose to C-Rod, who he's good, but he's not exactly a world beater. So maybe he isn't of that level and they're doing the right thing. I don't know. I'm going to pick Raul Rosas Jr. by decision. Kelvin Gastelum versus Joe Pyfer. Very excited for this fight. Very excited. When it got announced, immediately it just made me think, okay, maybe not interesting because of how competitive I think it's going to be. But I think, and maybe this is spoiling the prediction too early, we're probably going to see Kelvin Gastelum get slumped here. And not that I'm rooting for that, but just, I don't know. It's just interesting. You look at their attributes. Kelvin Gastelum, fat bantamweight. He's 5'9", 71.5 inches of reach, which, you know, people have that. It's more about the height that we're sort of focusing on. 5'9". It's not great. You see Joe Pyfer, 75-inch reach, 6'2". That's more typical for a middleweight. Kelvin was a welterweight early in his career, but he was on the pies too much and he had to move up. He tried moving down briefly, again, against Sean Brady, but that you know, we know how good Sean Brady is now. So that loss isn't really, it's not really too bad. But then you look at the guys he's beaten as of recent, and by as of recent, I mean since the Israel Adesanya fight, because that's kind of been where his downfall started. He beat Ian Heinisch, who at the time, I remember thinking that was a great one, but sort of that aged pretty poorly. Chris Curtis, decent one. Chris, you know, he's a hard guy to outstrike. He outstruck Chris Curtis. And then Daniel Rodriguez, who, I don't think Daniel Rodriguez, that's not a great win, especially the circumstances around, it was going to be a welterweight fight, but then it had to get moved up because, again, Kelvin, he's on the pies too much. I'm glad he's staying at middleweight here. Joe Pyfer. He truly, and I wouldn't say this a lot, he has fuck-off knockout power. Like, the punch machine, when he broke Ngannou's record, do I believe he actually broke it? Probably not. I think they probably messed with it, but it's pretty evident with the way he's flatlining guys, you know? He had that fight, his first fight in the Contender Series, where he kind of, I would say it was a fluke, but he got slammed and broke his arm against Dustin Stoltz first. I think they've missed the boat to do that rematch. They should do it before they get Pyfer ranked, just to get that off his record. Because he would knock out Dustin Stoltz first. Not the point. He went back, won a fight, and they gave him another shot. Knocked out Ozzy Diaz. Came into the UFC. Knocked out Alan Abadovsky. Not a great one, whatever. Knocked out Gerald Meerschaert. And then actually went in and, let me check, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, right after that, a month later he went and bet Gerald Meerschaert in a grappling match, which is just it's a big fuck you. Which I think's hilarious. Went in there, he actually arm triangled Abdul Razak Al Hassan, showing he's a bit more diverse. And then he fought crafty Jack Hermansson, who, don't know if you've seen the profile picture. I like Jack Hermansson a lot. This fight's actually one of my favourite fights of all time. Just, I was watching it with someone at the time, and I just remember just seeing sort of the slow build of the, shit, Pyfer's going to knock him out, to the, okay, Pyfer looks like he's slowing down a little bit, to the, okay, Pyfer's gassing, and Jack Hermansson sort of putting it on him, to, holy shit, Jack Hermansson just won a unanimous decision over Joseph Pyfer. It's one of my better memories watching fights, actually. But since then, because I didn't really like Joe Pyfer at the time, he's lost. That's sufficient enough for me to sort of be on his side now. Came back, flattened Marc-Andre Barriault. In fact, kind of weird that we haven't seen him back earlier since then. That was 9 months ago. Kind of get back in there, buddy. What are we doing here? But yeah, he's fighting Kelvin Gastelum here. Kelvin's been dropped in this sort of second half of his career almost since the Izzy fight. I think in that, I forget what the exact stat was, but it was either he got a record set on him for the most knockdowns landed in a round or in a fight. I think it was in the 5th round of that Adesanya fight, though. Then I remember against Cannonier, he got dropped at least once. You know, it's sort of degrading a bit. He's getting older. He's 33. I think he was the youngest winner of the Ultimate Fighter. So it's not like he's that old, but in terms of fight years, dude's 40. He's old. Didn't look great against Daniel Rodriguez. I remember that fight left a gross taste in my mouth. I think Joe Pyfer, he might drop him in the first time. He'll definitely outstrike him, definitely hit him with hard shots. Second round, I think he's going to start dropping Kelvin, hurting him. And in the third, I think we're going to see a pretty sad finish, and I think he's probably going to flatline Kelvin Gastelum. And it's going to be a weird thing to say, but prepare yourself. That's Joe Pyfer by third round knockout. Manuel Torres versus Drew Dober. This is another good one. We're getting to the good fights in the card. This is getting exciting. If you look at the ages, I think Drew Dober, he's 36, Manuel Torres 30. Drew Dober's kind of petering out in his career a bit. 2 inches shorter, 3 inches less in reach. If you look at his career, he's lost 2 in a row. You need to look at who they're two. It's the Renato Moicano loss, which was a very close fight. He was scheduled to fight Mike Davis. That would have been fun. But then he also lost to Jean Silva, which incredibly impressive that Jean could come up. I think that was on like 10 days' notice. You know, and beat Drew Dober, Dr. Stoppage. He would have won the fight. He was dropping. I think he dropped Drew Dober like 3 times, which that's hard to do. Dropping Drew Dober. He's a very durable guy. You look at sort of as of recent in the last sort of 5 years, the guys that he loses to Islam Makhachev, which obviously champ now. Brad Riddell, who was something, we'll see now. He's kind of on a bit of a slide. Matt Frivola, which at the time was looking like Matt was going to be something, sort of didn't turn out to be. That's fine. Then Renato and Jean Silva, as said, 2 guys who were both fairly decent. And he's sort of beating guys who aren't, you know, really at that level, with maybe the exception of King Green, because Bobby Green is a decent guy. Another guy on a slide, though. Whereas you look at Manuel Torres, he's 3-1 in the UFC. He debuted against Frank the Crank Camacho. Knocked him out. Good. You make the Crank look at the level that the Crank is actually at. That's good. He murdered Nicholas Motta. Like I don't know if the cops got called on him afterwards. Murdered him with an elbow. And then went in there and choked out Chris Duncan in under 2 minutes, which after last weekend, that's looking like that's a pretty decent win to out-grapple Chris Duncan. Nice. And then in his last fight on the Sphere card, got knocked out in a round by Ignacio Bahamondes. Ignacio's good though. Yeah, I think Ignacio is definitely sort of a guy you're going to see in the top 10 maybe for a while. So, not a bad loss. Come in here, fight Drew Dober. I think he's probably going to win. I think even though he's coming off a loss, he has maybe not momentum, but he career-wise, you know, he's got more to give than Drew Dober does, he's on a 2-fight losing streak now. I don't think Manuel Torres is going to finish him, but I think he might hurt him at a couple points. We're definitely starting to see the Crimson Chin, you know. It's starting to go a little bit for Drew Dober. Poor Drew, he never got to fight Jalen Turner. Called him out many, many times. If he pulls this one off, he'll be calling him out while Jalen's retired, trying to get him back for one last fight. I think Manuel Torres' rangy striking is going to be enough to keep Drew Dober at bay. Yeah, I think if they want to go to the ground, Manuel showed in that fight against Chris Duncan that he can hang on the ground. In fact, he's got 15 wins, 1 by decision, and then 7 apiece by each type of finish you can get. That being KO. I said that very weirdly. 7 wins by KO, TKO, 7 wins by submission. You look at Drew Dober, he's a guy who has been TKO'd a few times. He's a guy who has been submitted 4 times. Even really thinking about it, if Manuel wants to take it to the ground, he might be able to do that. I am going to pick Manuel Torres, though, as said before, hurt Drew Dober a few times, and will probably win a 30-27 unanimous decision. Main event, Brandon Moreno versus Steve Erceg. This is a weird one. Steve Erceg is coming off 2 losses, getting Brandon Moreno, which at face value you'd think, why is he getting this fight? This is a really weird one. But then you sort of look at the context here about the weirdness that happened with this Mexico main event, and how it was supposed to originally be, or it was rumored it was going to be, what's his face? Diego Lopez versus Yair Rodriguez. Then they had to pull Diego out, and then they found a new matchup for Yair, so they had to make something here. And Yeah, there was some more to it. I can't remember, but it ended with us having this. So it's understandable circumstances, but still, they probably should just put Manel Cap in here instead of doing Asel Mabayev Cap, because that's the other bit. Yeah, Steve Erceg was supposed to be fighting Asel Mabayev, but it would have made way more sense just to keep that fight and then do Manel Cap versus Brandon Moreno when Brandon Moreno pulled out of his Manel Cap fight. That sounded very convoluted. I swear it all makes sense. Actually, talking about this fight here, Brandon Moreno, I always think of him as a taller guy than he is, but, Steve Erceg's going to have an inch of height, but Moreno is going to have an inch and a half of reach on Steve Erceg here. Moreno, obviously, a very nice boxer. He's got very nice jiu-jitsu. Steve Erceg, very nice jiu-jitsu. The striking, maybe it's been overblown a little bit, but he's still a very serviceable striker, right? I feel like maybe people got a little bit too high on it after he knocked out Matt Schnell. I hear Matt Schnell just got into a barroom brawl and got knocked out. I'm kidding, of course, but he's not really the guy with the strongest chin. In fact, I think that was Steve Erceg. That was only his second KO win ever in his entire career. Goes in there, fights Alejandro Pantoja, takes it to Pantoja. Very close. Didn't deserve the shot, but there was no one else. Probably could have given it to Mikhaev, but Mikhaev wasn't coming off a knockout, so they wanted someone with a bit more hype. Yeah, and I remember at the time thinking he arguably won. I was biased. That's fine. He probably didn't. He came in against Kai, and a lot of people... I think he was a pretty decent favourite against Kai. Kai came in there, shuttled that shit down. Really put everyone back down to earth, saying, this guy hasn't really proved himself at that top level. What made you thought he'd beat me? Kai, one round, knocked him out. It was pretty impressive from Kai, actually, and he probably is going to earn a title shot off that. Weird circumstances here. Moreno coming off that win against Amir Albazi. Loved seeing that, because Amir Albazi robbed Kai. He really showed that Amir doesn't belong in the top 5 at all. Maybe not even in the top 7. Yeah, so I don't know. It was an impressive performance, not against the best guy, though, I'd say. And you look at his 2 losses before that. He lost to Brandon Royval in a rematch, split decision, where he fought like a bit of an idiot, so winging overhands. And then he lost a split to Pantoja, which shouldn't have been a split. That should have been unanimous. Pantoja won the belt off him there. I'm just glad we're out of the Davison, Figueiredo, Moreno era. They were good fights, but at a point, we kind of need to move on in the division. Actually moving on to talking about the fight, though, because I've rambled for 3.5 minutes just about external factors. I think that it's probably going to stay standing the entire time. I think Moreno is going to outstrike him. Not by much. I think people are going to be surprised again by how close Erceg's able to make it. I don't think Moreno really has the finishing power on the feet to be able to punish Steve Erceg in the way that Kai did. That being said, if it goes to the ground, it could be interesting. Erceg's a good grappler, but even then, I think Moreno probably still would out-grapple him. He's shown he can scramble with the best of them. His first fight with Brandon Royval until Brandon injured himself. Those were incredible scrambles. Some of his scrambles with Davison as well. He's Pantoja. He's a great grappler. I think Moreno probably, I don't want to say coasts, but a little more light of the version we did against Amir Albazi. Probably. It's just going to be 5 rounds. I'd say he's going to win all 5 of them. There might be a cheeky round 2, round 4, where Erceg edges it out. I think Steve Erceg needs to take a big step down in competition after this, because he'll be 3-3. I don't think he'll get cut, obviously, because his 3 losses would be against Alejandro Pantoja, Kai Kara-France, and Brandon Moreno. Those are 3 incredible fighters. But, booking that Asel Mabayev fight after this, I think that's where he's headed. Not to get too ahead of myself, but yeah, I'm going to go Brandon Moreno by unanimous decision. Thanks for watching. I'm having a lot of fun making these videos. It's making me think a lot more. Actually try and analyze what's going on with the fights. I'm getting distracted by Steve Erceg's nose right now, looking at the poster. Back on track. Thank you to the people who viewed my last 2 videos. I was expecting them to get 1-2 views sort of thing. I think the predictions on 39 views and the reactions on 29, which is just incredible. Thank you. I came in with no expectations doing this, but I'm having a lot of fun, as said. Anyway, rambling aside, hopefully these fights go well. they should be fun. It's a good card towards the top of it. Thank you for listening. Hope you have a good day, and take care.